They had lived in peace for 10,000 years. They were small creatures, no taller than a human child, with 4 arms and large black eyes that reflected the light of distant stars. Their bodies were covered in soft blue shells, and their voices sounded like wind chimes when they spoke. They had no claws, no fangs, no weapons of any kind. They were scholars. They were keepers of knowledge. They were the gentlest species in the entire galaxy. Their home world, Nexus 7, was famous throughout the galactic Concord. It held the Great Library, the largest collection of knowledge ever created. Every species that joined the Concord sent copies of their history, their science, their art, and their stories to the Great Library. They protected it all. They organized it. They preserved it. For 100 generations, they had done nothing else. No one had ever attacked the. There was no reason to attack them. They had no army. They had no valuable resources. They were simply librarians, and the galaxy left them alone. Until the Dominion decided they wanted Nexus 7. They were everything they were not. They were massive reptilian creatures, standing over 3 meters tall, with scales the color of dried blood and teeth like broken glass. They had conquered 47 worlds in the last century alone. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They took what they wanted, and they destroyed anyone who tried to stop them. Warlord commanded the invasion fleet. He sat on his throne aboard the flagship Crimson Vengeance and looked at the star map showing Nexus 7. The planet itself was worthless to him, but its location was perfect. 5 major hyperspace lanes crossed through the Nexus system. Whoever controlled that system controlled trade across an entire sector of the galaxy. They would have to go. Sent his message to the planet below. His face appeared on every screen on Nexus 7, in every home and every hall of the Great Library. His voice was like grinding stone. People of Nexus 7, I am Warlord of the Dominion. You have 7 days to leave this world. Take whatever you can carry. After 7 days, my fleet will begin its bombardment. Anyone still on the surface will die. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. Across Nexus 7, 12 billion looked at each other in terror. Ambassador Hai was the eldest member of the council. She was over 200 years old, ancient even by standards. Her shell had faded from bright blue to pale gray, and her movements were slow and careful. But her mind was still sharp, and her heart still burned with love for her people. She stood in the council chamber and looked at the faces around her. Some were crying. Some were frozen in shock. Some were already talking about evacuation ships that did not exist and escape routes that would never work. We cannot run, said Hai. Her voice was soft but clear. We have no ships to carry 12 billion people. We have nowhere to go. And even if we could escape, the Great Library cannot be moved. 10,000 years of knowledge from 100 civilizations. We cannot abandon it. Then we will die, said another council member. They will kill us all. Hai closed her eyes. She thought about her children, her, and all the young who would never grow old. She thought about the Great Library burning, all that knowledge turning to ash. She thought about the standing in the ruins of her world, laughing at the destruction they had caused. And then she thought about the beacon. Every member of the Galactic Concord received an emergency beacon when they joined. It was a simple device designed to send a distress signal to every other member species. They had received theirs 8,000 years ago. They had never used it. They had never needed to use it. Hai walked to the ancient storage vault beneath the council chamber. She pushed aside boxes of old documents and forgotten artifacts until she found what she was looking for. The beacon was small, no larger than her hand. It was covered in dust and its surface was scratched and worn. But when she pressed the activation button, it began to glow with soft golden light. She carried it back to the council chamber and placed it on the table. We will ask for help, she said. The other council members stared at her. No one will come, said one of them. They are too powerful. No species will risk war with the Dominion for our sake. Perhaps, said Hai, but we must try. We have never asked anyone for anything. We have only given. We have preserved the histories of species that no longer exist. We have protected knowledge that would otherwise be lost forever. If there is any justice in this galaxy, someone will remember that. Someone will come. She activated the beacon. The signal burst outward from Nexus 7 at faster-than-light speeds. It crossed hundreds of light years in seconds, reaching every corner of the galactic conquered. Every species with a receiver heard the message. It was simple. It was desperate. It was the first time in 10,000 years that they had asked for anything. This is Nexus 7. We are under attack. We cannot defend ourselves. Please help us, please. Across the galaxy, leaders and politicians heard the message. They looked at their military advisors. They calculated the odds. They weighed the costs. And one by one, they decided to do nothing. They were too strong. The risk was too great. They were not worth the sacrifice. On the core worlds of the conquered, the great powers sent polite messages of sympathy and did nothing else. On the frontier worlds, smaller species heard the call and wished they could help, but knew they would be destroyed if they tried. The galaxy had received this cry for help. The galaxy had chosen to ignore it. But the signal did not stop at the borders of known space. It continued outward, past the edges of the maps, into the regions where new species were still learning to travel between stars. It reached a small yellow sun with 8 planets orbiting around it. It reached the third planet from that sun, a world of blue oceans and green continents. It reached the creatures who lived there, the ones who had only discovered faster-than-light travel 11 years ago. It reached Earth. And on Earth, in a military command center buried deep beneath a mountain, a young communications officer named Lieutenant saw the signal appear on her screen. She read the message 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Then she picked up her phone and called her commanding officer. "Sir," she said, "you need to see this. Someone is asking for help." In the darkness of space, 300 warships moved toward Nexus 7. They expected no resistance. They expected an easy victory. They expected nothing but frightened librarians waiting to die. They did not know that the signal had reached Earth. They did not know that humanity had heard the call. And they did not know that humanity always answered. The message from Nexus 7 arrived on Earth at 3 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. Within 1 hour, it had reached every major government on the planet. Within 2 hours, the United Earth Defense Council had been called into emergency session. General was the first to arrive. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had fought in the Mars Uprising 20 years ago and the Belt Rebellion 10 years after that. She knew war better than most people knew their own families. And when she read the message from she knew exactly what needed to be done. The other council members arrived slowly. Politicians in expensive suits, admirals in decorated uniforms, scientists and advisors and experts of every kind. They filled the chamber and talked in worried voices about the situation. General stood at the front of the room and waited for silence. When everyone was seated, she pressed a button, and the message played on the main screen. The small, gentle voice of Ambassador High filled the chamber. "This is Nexus 7. We are under attack. We cannot defend ourselves. Please help us, please." The message ended. The room was quiet. "The Dominion has sent 300 warships to Nexus 7, said General. "They have given the 7 days to evacuate. They have no evacuation ships. They have no military. They have 12 billion civilians and the largest library in the galaxy." She paused and looked at the faces around her. "They are asking for help." A politician near the back of the room raised his hand. His name was Secretary, and he was known for being careful with money and careful with lives. "General, what exactly are you suggesting? That we send our fleet to fight the—" "Yes. They have 300 warships. How many do we have?" 47 capital ships, 200 support vessels, approximately 90,000 combat personnel. Secretary laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want us to send 47 ships against 300. That is not a battle, General. That is suicide. Perhaps, said General, but we'll die if we do nothing. They are not our responsibility. We have no treaty with them. We have no obligation to protect them. Earth has only been part of the galactic conquered for 11 years. We are still building our fleet, still training our soldiers, still learning how to survive in this galaxy. We cannot afford to throw away our military on a hopeless mission. Admiral Way stood up from his seat. He was an older man with a calm face and steady hands. He had commanded Earth's first fleet since its creation and had never lost a battle. When he spoke, everyone listened. Secretary, he said, do you know why they have never asked anyone for help before? Frowned, because they never needed help before. No, because they never believed anyone would come. Admiral walked to the front of the room and stood beside General. They have spent 10,000 years serving the galaxy. They have preserved the histories of species that were destroyed by war and disease and disaster. They have protected knowledge that would otherwise be lost forever. They have given everything and asked for nothing in return. He pointed at the screen, where the message was still displayed. And now, for the first time in their history, they are asking for help. They are asking because they have no other choice. They are asking because they are about to die. Admiral turned to face the council. I did not become a soldier to watch innocent people die. I did not build this fleet to hide behind our own borders while the galaxy burns. The call for help. Someone needs to answer. The room erupted in argument. Politicians shouted about budgets and risks and international relations. Military officers argued about tactics and logistics and survival rates. Scientists talked about the strategic value of Nexus 7 and the importance of the Great Library. General let them argue for 10 minutes. Then she raised her hand and waited for silence. We will take a vote, she said. All in favor of sending aid to Nexus 7, raise your hand. Slowly, hands began to rise. Admiral raised his hand first, then General, then other military officers, one by one. Some of the politicians raised their hands too, the ones who still believed in doing what was right even when it was hard. Secretary looked around the room with disbelief on his face. You are all insane, he said. This mission will fail. Our people will die for nothing. Maybe, said Admiral, but at least we will have tried. The vote passed. Within 1 hour, orders went out to every military base on Earth, Mars, Luna, and the Belt. The 1st through 5th expeditionary fleets were called to active duty. Reserve soldiers were contacted and told to report immediately. Factories that had been building civilian goods switched to military production. Humanity began to wake up. Across the world, soldiers said goodbye to their families. Mothers hugged their sons. Fathers held their daughters. Husbands kissed their wives. They did not know if they would ever see each other again. They only knew that someone far away needed help, and they had chosen to answer. Private James was 22 years old. He had joined the Marines 3 years ago and had never seen real combat. When he got the call, he was eating dinner with his grandmother in Lagos. He put down his fork, read the message on his phone, and stood up from the table. I have to go, Grandma, he said. His grandmother looked at him with old, wise eyes. She had seen wars before. She knew what that look on his face meant. Where are you going? She asked. Someone needs help, far away. I do not know if I will come back. His grandmother stood up and wrapped her arms around him. She was small and thin, but her hug was strong. Then you go, she said. You go and you help them. That is what good people do. Across Earth, 1 million similar goodbyes were happening. Soldiers leaving their homes, pilots climbing into their ships, engineers loading supplies onto transport vessels. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone knew they might not survive. They went anyway. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Resilience, and watched the fleet gather around him. 47 capital ships, each one carrying thousands of crew members. 200 support vessels loaded with soldiers and supplies. The largest military force Earth had ever sent beyond its own solar system. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough, but it was everything they had. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral. In 12 hours, we will jump to the Nexus system. We will face an enemy that outnumbers us 6-1. Many of us will not come home." He paused and looked out the window at the stars. "But we do not fight because we think we will win. We fight because they asked for help. We fight because innocent people should not have to die alone. We fight because that is who we are." He straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. "We are human. Today we show the galaxy what that means." The fleet jumped. And far away on Nexus 7, Ambassador High stood at her window and looked up at the sky. She did not know that help was coming. She did not know that 47 ships were racing toward her world. She only knew that she had sent a message into the darkness and hoped someone would answer. She would not have to wait long. The human fleet arrived at Nexus 7 3 days before the deadline. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 47 warships spreading out like a wall of steel between the planet and the approaching enemy. The support vessels stayed behind, ready to provide supplies and rescue services when the battle began. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Resilience and looked at the tactical display. 300 red dots represented the fleet, still 2 days away but moving fast. One blue dot represented Nexus 7, a small world full of frightened civilians, and between them 47 green dots, his fleet, his people. The odds were terrible. He had known that before they left Earth, but seeing the numbers on the screen made it feel real in a way it had not felt before. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It is Ambassador High." "Put it through." The face of an old appeared on the main screen. Her large black eyes were wide with disbelief. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "You came," she said. "You actually came." Admiral allowed himself a small smile. "You asked for help, Ambassador. We heard you. But their fleet is so large, your ships are enough," said. "We will protect your world, Ambassador. That is a promise." High was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "We have never had allies before. We have never had anyone willing to fight for us. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you for coming." The transmission ended. Admiral turned to his tactical officer. "Begin defensive preparations. I want every ship in position before they arrive. And get me a channel to Warlord. I want to talk to him." "Sir." "Just do it." It took several hours to establish contact with the flagship. Warlord did not like talking to his enemies. He preferred to simply destroy them. But he was curious about these humans who had come so far to die, so he accepted the communication request. His face appeared on the screen. He was massive, even for a. His scales were the color of dark blood, and a long scar ran across his face from his forehead to his jaw. His yellow eyes burned with cruel intelligence. "So," he said, "you are the humans. I have heard of your species. Young, weak, emotional. I did not expect you to be stupid as well." Admiral stood calmly in front of the screen. His hands were folded behind his back. His expression showed no fear. "Warlord, I am Admiral Way of the United Earth Navy. I am here to inform you that Nexus 7 is under our protection. You will withdraw your fleet from this system immediately." Laughed. It was an ugly sound, like rocks grinding together. "Under your protection. You have 47 ships, human. I have 300. Do you not understand basic mathematics?" "I understand it perfectly." "Then you understand that you cannot win. Your fleet will be destroyed. Your soldiers will die. And then I will take Nexus 7 anyway, and I will burn the Great Library to ash just to punish the for wasting my time." Admiral did not react to the threat. His voice remained calm and steady. "You have made a mistake, Warlord. You have looked at our numbers and decided we are weak. You have looked at our ships and decided we are primitive. You do not understand what you are facing." Leaned forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. "And what am I facing, human? A species that does not know how to surrender. A species that will fight to the last soldier, the last ship, the last breath. You think you can frighten us with your numbers. We have fought wars that lasted generations. We have climbed out of the mud and reached for the stars. We have survived everything the universe has thrown at us, and we are still here." Took a step closer to the screen. "You can kill us, Warlord, but you cannot make us run. You cannot make us abandon the people we came to protect. And when this battle is over, when you have spent your fleet trying to break through our line, you will realize that you should have listened when I gave you the chance to leave." Was silent for a moment. Something flickered in his eyes. It might have been doubt. It might have been curiosity. It might have been the first hint of fear. "You are brave, human," he said finally. "Brave and foolish. In 2 days I will show you what happens to brave fools who stand in my way." The transmission ended. Captain walked onto the bridge. She was a small woman with short black hair and sharp eyes. She commanded the strike carrier Defiance and had a reputation for being fearless in combat. "Sir," she said, "the crews are asking questions. They want to know if we can really win this fight." Turned to look at her. "What do you think, Captain?" Thought about it for a moment. "I think we are. I think we are outnumbered. I think a lot of good people are going to die in the next few days. And I think we are going to win anyway." Nodded. "Tell the crews that we are not here to survive. We are here to protect 12 billion innocent people who have no one else to help them. We are here to show the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises. We are here to fight." He looked out the window at the stars. They think they understand war. They think they understand violence. But they have never faced an enemy who was willing to die for something greater than themselves. They have never faced humans. Across the fleet, soldiers prepared for battle. They checked their weapons. They tested their armor. They wrote letters to families they might never see again. Some of them prayed. Some of them cried. All of them were afraid. But none of them ran. On the planet below, they watched the human ships take their positions. They had never seen warships before. They had never seen soldiers or weapons or anything designed to kill. The sight of the human fleet should have frightened them. Instead, it gave them hope. Ambassador High stood at her window and watched the stars. Somewhere up there, 47 ships full of strangers were preparing to die for her people. She did not understand why they had come. She did not understand why they were willing to sacrifice so much for species they had never met. But she was grateful. For the first time in days, she was grateful. The fleet continued to approach. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one crewed by soldiers who had never known defeat. They were confident. They were powerful. They were ready to crush the humans and take what they wanted. They did not know that the humans were ready too. They did not know that the humans had been ready their entire history. And in 2 days, when the battle finally began, they would learn what it meant to face a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity could do. The battle for Nexus 7 began at dawn on the planet below. Not that it mattered in space, where there was no day or night, but the timing felt right to the humans. They had always done their best fighting when the sun was rising. Warlord gave the order to attack with complete confidence. His 300 ships moved forward in a massive wave, expecting the humans to fall back, to scatter, to try and survive as long as possible before being destroyed. The humans did not fall back. They charged. Admiral gave a single command. "All ships forward, attack formation Alpha. Show them what we are made of. 47 human warships accelerated directly into the heart of the fleet. They did not try to stay at range and pick off enemies from a distance. They did not try to fight a defensive battle. They drove straight into the enemy like a fist into a face. They were confused. No species had ever attacked them like this. Every other enemy they had faced tried to run, tried to hide, tried to delay the inevitable. But the humans were racing toward them, firing every weapon they had, screaming war cries over open communication channels. Captain led the first strike wing. Her carrier, the Defiance, launched fighters by the dozens. She flew her own ship at the front of the formation, leading her pilots into the enemy. "Stay on my wing," she called over the radio. "Target their missile cruisers first. Do not let them get shots at our capital ships." The fighters came to meet them. They were larger than human fighters, with heavier armor and bigger guns. One-on-one, a fighter should have destroyed a human fighter every time. But the humans did not fight one-on-one. They fought in pairs, in groups, covering each other and working together like parts of a single machine. When one human pilot was in danger, 3 others would sweep in to help. When a fighter locked onto a target, it would suddenly find itself attacked from multiple angles at once. Destroyed her first enemy in the opening seconds of the battle. She destroyed her second 5 seconds later. Her fighter twisted and spun through the chaos, dodging enemy fire, returning shots with perfect accuracy. She was not trying to survive. She was trying to kill as many enemies as possible before they killed her. On the bridge of the Resilience, Admiral watched the battle unfold. His ships were taking damage. Some were already burning, their hulls torn open by weapons. But they were also dealing damage. Cruisers were exploding. Destroyers were spinning out of control with their engines destroyed. The human fleet was cutting a path through the enemy formation. "Sir," shouted his tactical officer, "the flagship is moving to engage. Warlord is coming for us directly." Nodded. "Good, let him come. All ships concentrate fire on the flagship. If we kill their leader, the rest will break." The battle became a storm of fire and metal. Ships crashed into each other. Debris filled the space between the fleets. Escape pods launched from dying vessels, both human and tumbling through the chaos. Private James was aboard the battleship Johannesburg when the boarding parties arrived. He was stationed in Corridor 7 with a squad of 11 other Marines. Their job was simple: hold the corridor and do not let the enemy reach the engine room. The first wave of soldiers came through the breach in the hull like a flood of scales and teeth. They were huge, towering over the human soldiers. Their weapons fired bolts of superheated plasma that could burn through armor in seconds. James raised his rifle and fired. The first fell, then the second, then the third, but more kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades, screaming war cries in their harsh language. The Marines held their ground. They fought with rifles, then pistols, then knives when their ammunition ran out. One by one they fell, but for every Marine that died, they took 10 with them. 6 hours later, James was the last one standing. His rifle was broken, used as a club until the stock shattered against a skull. His pistol was empty. His knife was somewhere in the chest of an enemy soldier 3 meters behind him. He picked up a metal pipe from the wreckage and kept fighting. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found James standing in the middle of the corridor, surrounded by 17 dead. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own. His eyes were wild, and he was still swinging the pipe at enemies who were no longer moving. "Private," called the rescue team leader. "Private, it is over. You can stop now." James blinked. He looked at the pipe in his hands. He looked at the bodies around him. Then he dropped the pipe and sat down on the floor. "They did not get through," he said quietly. "I did not let them get through." On the other side of the battle, Captain's fighter was finally destroyed. A lucky shot from a cruiser tore through her engines and sent her spinning out of control. She managed to eject before the ship exploded, but she was floating in the middle of the enemy fleet with no weapon and no way to escape. She looked around and saw a transport ship passing nearby. Without hesitation, she activated her suit thrusters and flew toward it. She landed on the hull, pulled out her emergency plasma torch, and began cutting through the metal. It took her 20 minutes to break into the ship. It took her another hour to fight her way to the bridge, armed with nothing but a sidearm and her bare hands. When she arrived, the captain tried to surrender. She shot him anyway. Then she turned the transport ship's weapons on the nearest cruiser and opened fire. The battle lasted 9 hours. When it finally ended, the space around Nexus 7 was filled with wreckage. 212 ships had been destroyed or captured. 81 more were too damaged to continue fighting. The survivors were retreating at maximum speed, their confidence shattered. Warlord was captured alive. His flagship had been boarded by human marines who fought their way to his throne room and dragged him out in chains. He did not understand how it had happened. He did not understand how 47 ships had destroyed his armada. Humanity had lost 31 ships. 4,612 soldiers, sailors, and pilots had died in the battle. Their names would be carved into monuments on Earth and remembered for generations. But they had won. Admiral stood on his damaged bridge and looked at the stars. Fires burned on half his remaining ships. Medical teams were rushing to save the wounded. Rescue shuttles were searching the debris field for survivors. His communications officer turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from the planet. They are thanking us, all of them. 12 billion people all saying thank you." Closed his eyes and let out a breath he had been holding for 9 hours. "Tell them," he said, "that they are welcome. Tell them that this is what humans do." The battle for Nexus 7 was over. And the galaxy would never forget what it had witnessed. The news of the Battle of Nexus 7 spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to communication networks heard the story. Every government, every military leader, every ordinary citizen learned what had happened. A species called humanity, members of the galactic conquered for only 11 years, had answered a call for help. They had traveled across the stars to defend a world they had never visited, to protect a people they had never met. They had faced an enemy that outnumbered them 6-1. And they had won. In the halls of power across the conquered, leaders watched the recordings of the battle with growing disbelief. They saw human ships charging into the enemy fleet without hesitation. They saw human soldiers fighting hand to hand against enemies twice their size. They saw men and women dying with weapons in their hands and defiance on their faces. They had been the most feared military power in the region for 3 centuries. They had conquered dozens of worlds. No one had ever defeated them in open battle. Until now. On Nexus 7, the cleanup began slowly. Human medical teams worked alongside healers to treat the wounded. Human engineers helped repair the damage to the cities that had been hit by stray weapons fire. Human soldiers patrolled the streets, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Ambassador Hai walked through the ruins of her council chamber. The ceiling had collapsed during the battle and debris covered the floor. But the building still stood and her people were still alive. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Admiral approaching. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his uniform was stained with smoke and blood. But he still walked with the same calm dignity she had seen in their first conversation. "Ambassador," he said, "I came to see if there was anything else you needed." Hai looked at him for a long moment. This human had traveled across the galaxy to save her people. He had lost thousands of his own soldiers in the battle, and now he was asking if there was anything else he could do. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you come? Why did you fight for us? We had nothing to offer you. No reward, no alliance, no strategic advantage. Why did you risk so much for strangers? Considered the question. He looked out the broken window at the sky, where human ships were still visible in orbit. On Earth, he said, we have a saying. We say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. He turned back to face her. You called for help, that was enough. But the cost, your people knew what they were doing. Every soldier in my fleet volunteered for this mission. They knew the odds. They knew they might die. They came anyway because they believed it was the right thing to do. Smiled a sad and tired smile. That is who we are, Ambassador. We fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. We stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. We do not ask what we will gain. We only ask what is right. Hai felt tears forming in her large black eyes. She had lived for 200 years. She had studied the histories of 100 civilizations. She had never encountered a species quite like humanity. We will never forget this, she said. Though we'll remember what you did for us for as long as our species exists. Across the galaxy, other species were also remembering, and they were afraid. The Dominion from 3 sectors of space in the weeks following the battle. Their remaining fleets pulled back to defensive positions, abandoning worlds they had conquered decades ago. Warlord was stripped of his rank and imprisoned by his own government, a warning to other commanders who might fail so spectacularly. Other aggressive empires took notice. The hegemony quietly canceled their planned invasion of the Nexus Collective stopped their expansion into neutral space. The Crimson Fleet, a massive pirate organization, announced that they would no longer attack ships flying under Earth's flag. In the diplomatic halls of the Galactic Concord, the representatives of Earth found themselves treated very differently than before. Species that had ignored them now sought their friendship. Leaders who had dismissed them as primitive now asked for alliances and trade agreements. The humans had been members of the Concord for only 11 years. In a single battle, they had changed everything. Back on Earth, the soldiers who had survived the battle returned home to heroes' welcomes. Parades filled the streets of every major city. Monuments were built to honor the fallen. The names of the dead were read aloud in ceremonies that lasted for days. Private James stood in the crowd at the ceremony in Lagos and listened to the names being read. He heard the names of the 11 Marines who had died beside him in Corridor 7. He remembered their faces, their voices, the way they had fought until the very end. His grandmother stood beside him, her hand in his. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She simply held his hand and let him grieve. Captain received a medal for her actions during the battle. She stood on a stage in Tokyo while the President of Earth pinned it to her chest. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. She was called a hero, a legend, a symbol of everything humanity could achieve. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like a survivor. She felt like someone who had done what needed to be done and been lucky enough to live through it. In the great library of Nexus 7, the archivists began work on a new section. They called it the Hall of Humanity. It would contain records of everything humanity had done, from their earliest history on Earth to their victory at Nexus 7. It would preserve their stories, their music, their art, and their achievements for future generations. Above the entrance to the hall, they carved an inscription in 100 different languages. The words were simple, but they captured something essential about the species that had saved them. They heard our call, they came, they fought, they asked for nothing. And below that, in letters that glowed with soft golden light, they added the words Admiral had spoken to Ambassador Hai. You called for help, that was enough. Years passed, the galaxy changed and grew and evolved. New species joined the conquered. Old empires rose and fell. Wars were fought and won and lost. But whenever the strong threatened the weak, whenever an innocent world faced destruction, whenever someone sent a desperate call for help into the darkness of space, they knew there was one species they could count on. Humanity would answer. On Earth, children grew up hearing the stories of Nexus 7. They learned about Admiral and Captain and Private. They learned that being human meant standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. They learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else was more important than fear. And when they grew up and joined the military and traveled to distant stars, they carried those lessons with them. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity. Some species admired them. Some species feared them. But everyone understood one simple truth. When humanity made a promise, they kept it. When humanity took a stand, they did not back down. And when someone called for help, humanity answered. The wolves among the stars had found their purpose. And the galaxy would never be the same.